Thank you for staying with us. No stranger to benchmark, DP Kumarage finds himself in the hot seat today. During an exclusive interview, the CEO and Managing Director of People's Leasing Company gave us his predictions for business in 2012. Kumarage assessed the government's budget proposals which were presented to Parliament in November, as well as the issues facing the leasing sector in Sri Lanka. Let's listen in. Welcome, Mr. Kumarage. It's a pleasure to have you once again on Benchmark. So, when you view the new year, what do you see from a business and also a national perspective?
Things look very positive, although there is a European debt crisis and in other major markets are in turmoil. Where our country is concerned, there are a lot of new projects are going to come in, expressways and even the Colombo South Harbour and a lot of other condominiums and shopping complexes. Maybe that we didn't get the expected foreign direct investment at the moment, but I am quite sure that even that will be in place in time to come the way that we are going. And we are very optimistic that there will be a substance, because the government is going to maintain a GDP growth rate of 8%, and they are going to have a per capita income to $4,000 by 2016. So they have to work towards that. So with those positive trends, I am sure there will be the economy should take off.
Well, some of the features of Budget 2012 are coming into being. What is your assessment of the budget?
If I talked about the industry where we are in, especially the leasing and mostly related to transport sector, most of the leasing companies are catering to SMEs. SMEs are the lifeblood of any economy, especially in this part of Asia. So this budget has given a lot of incentives for the transport sector and even for investment with related to SME. So we feel there will be added demand for, especially for the sector that what we are in, and we feel all leasing companies should do well, especially there is new openings in north and east. We are having almost 1/3 of the land and 2/3 of the sea had been added. So although the peace was setting in, it takes a lot of time to place the infrastructure, and with those things that is taking place at the moment, we feel there will be a lot of potential, especially in those areas and in general in the country as well.
Looking at the budget from an SME perspective, I mean, we've seen the lowering of a tax rate for the SME sector for banks and financial institutions. The applicable tax rate has been reduced to 24% from 28%, and on the income earned from SME lending. Now, is PLC taking advantage of the features that have been introduced, especially for SME lending?
Yeah, definitely. I think almost all leasing companies will take advantage, because most of the leasing companies, as I told earlier, Savitri, are catering to the SME sector. And moreover, now the new development is coming, the low end of SMEs like microfinance. So there are microfinance companies, some of the leasing companies have formed up even microfinance companies, and there are a lot of funds that is available for microfinance. So all these things will go and cater to the SME sector.
The stock market, Mr. Kumarage, continues to be in a lull, and I don't think we are ever going to see it return to those one-time dizzy heights. Similarly, there were expectations of an IPO frenzy, but that somehow never happened. It sort of tapered off. What do you think are the causes for this?
Stock market is a bit of a medium to long-term investment, and it is not, you can't gamble in the stock market. This more or less happened during the last few year or so, I said, and there was a lot of credit that came into the market, which should not be the case. Of course, now the regulatory requirement is a bit tightened, and earlier they allowed it to go scot-free, and then now they have applied these stringent measures. And of course, the IPOs, if you go through the 2011 IPO, we had a lot of IPOs, rights issues that came, and that mopped up a lot of money in the market. And still I feel a good IPO, if it is properly priced and with good features, still there will be a demand. Unfortunately, most of the IPOs that came, including the other one, I mean, when it came to the for trading, it was trading slightly less than the IPO price. But I am sure most of them in the long term because most of the corporates have done extremely well. Even most of the companies that have come to IPO in the recent past have done well, but it is quite sad that those things are not reflected in the pricing.
So, in the IPO environment, what can we expect in the short to medium term?
There will be good investors. If only worry is in the earliest years, the interest rate was quite low. If the interest rates are going to go up, which is quite likely, I mean, then the demand for IPOs also might, people might opt for normal investments than taking a risk in an IPO. But still, if a good company where there is lot of future potential, where there is lot of growth rate, and if the industry that they are in is quite, I mean, a lot of opportunities for improvement, and if the pricing is correct, still I believe there will be in the long term, because the investor will, a good investor will look at capital gains as well as long term investments. The investor should not look at a very short term on, especially with regard to IPO. IPOs are meant for medium to long term.
You had a mega IPO, the PLC IPO that came on the market last year. What lessons have you learned in the aftermath of that IPO, and what lessons can investors actually learn when it comes to investing in IPOs? Do you think we are going to also see private placements instead?
I don't think, this is my personal opinion, Savitri, I don't think private placement should be correct. I mean, there should not be any private placement, because that is not fair by the normal investor. If it is private placement, it should be at the same price that they are coming to the public, and they should be some locking in of shares should be permitted. If the price and IPO price and the private placement price is the same, well, I don't see there is much of a difficult situation in that, because what really happened was, in the previous IPOs, the private placement prices were comparatively very low compared to the IPO price. You should give an opportunity for an investor to decide on the normal course of action. I mean, where he can evaluate the performance of the company, and where he can go through research reports and then see whether this price is quite good and the growth potential of the company, and based on that the investor can look in.
How about the leasing sector, Mr. Kumarage? Where do you see potential for exponential growth?
Now, if you analyze for the last 2 to 3 years, I think leasing is one industry in the financial sector which has shown substantial growth. In fact, in the year 2010, the market grew almost by 150%, and still there is potential for the growth in this, because there is a lot of infrastructure projects that are going to come. As I said, the harbour and the other construction projects are going to come. All these things will need new equipment, new other vehicles, especially commercial vehicles, all that. And so with that in mind, I am sure there will be still a growth potential, especially as I said earlier, with the north and east, where there is a lot of appetite for growth, and where there is a lot of opportunities for other infrastructure to get developed. And by virtue of those things, there will be an opportunity for leasing companies. Still, we expect there to be a growth in this industry.
We have some messages from our sponsors now. Stay with us for more from DP Kumarage after the break. Thanks for staying with us. Here's the second half of our exclusive interview with the CEO and Managing Director of People's Leasing Company, DP Kumarage. You mentioned that 1/3 of the land and 2/3 of the sea have now come into Sri Lanka's economic growth prospects. If that is the case, and if we are looking at one of the drivers of this economy, and that's the SME sector, what part can the leasing industry play in the medium term, keeping in mind, of course, the heightened activity in the north and also in the east?
North and east, there is a lot of potential for fisheries sector and the agricultural sector. So these are the two key things, and a lot of infrastructure development has to take place in north and east, especially new buildings will have to come. Now the road network is already being done, and the export potential is also available in those areas. So with those things in mind, unfortunately, we didn't expect at a faster rate, although we are already enjoying almost 2 years of peace. There was not much of development that took place, but now the entire infrastructure is getting developed. Now the road network is quite okay. Now they are going to develop the harbour, they are going to have internal flights to even to Jaffna. So I am sure with all those things there will be opportunities, especially for the SME sector, because they have to start from the scratch. Like unless there are big industries also which is quite possible, but basically small timers might do well in those areas.
Islamic finance is making headway not only in Sri Lanka but also overseas as well. What are the pros and cons of this form of financing compared to the traditional means?
Islamic finance, especially with regard to Muslim community, they are not supposed to invest in instruments which are not Sharia compliant. So most of these Muslim community, they are holding their money which then do not come to the banking circle. Either the monies are in the current accounts or they are not in the banking circle. But with regard to with the introduction of Islamic finance, where we are coming out with instruments called Ijara, Mudarabah, where those are instruments which are Sharia compliant, and there will be a Sharia supervisory board consisting of all Islamic scholars who will have to confirm that they are Sharia compliant. So with those things in place, most of the Muslim community will come and invest, and they will bring that money to the normal banking sector, which can be utilized for development of this country.
Mr. Kumarage, at long last we have our country's first expressway, the Southern Expressway. Now, how will this, and also there's talk of the Colombo-Kandy Road, the Katunaik Expressway all coming into being. How is this actually going to boost industry, boost economic prospects, especially for the rural sectors?
These expressways will carry all the businessmen. Their access to even through the rural sector will be, not that they are going through rural areas, but this will improve their accessibility to business operations, especially the farmers. Their products, they can bring it through these means. When the infrastructure is developing, that is the key to a development of any country. Without infrastructure, now say generally now we take from Kottawa to go to Galle for about 1 hour, but to go to Kottawa it might take more than that. But if we develop that area as well, I am sure those benefits the country will get, maybe by their time, the fuel cost that the companies they are saving, in the motor spare parts, their entrepreneurs' time, and their flexibility to move their products from villages to the center, all that will improve, and the quality of those products will, because it takes about 4 to 5 hours, can be brought in early. And even for other entrepreneurs, now say for instance Galle hotels are advertising for Colombo people to come and have dinner in Galle, and that's taking place. So these are all these things will really, these transport this infrastructure will contribute for the development of this country.
In one of the interviews for this new year, Jayantha Dhanapala did mention that while there are expressways, yes, to the south and to the airport and to Kandy, there should be similar efforts made to link Colombo to the north as well, so Colombo North Expressway. But that doesn't seem to be in the pipeline. Now, looking at the leasing and SME sector, don't you think we need something like this if we are going to connect the north as well as the east at some stage?
Although there is no expressway, Savitri, the roads are quite good now. I mean, they are still being continued, all right. Because even if you take to Anuradhapura to, I mean, I am sure Anuradhapura to Vavuniya doesn't take 1 hour 10 minutes now. And so although there are no expressways, the road network is getting developed. They are getting a little bit widened, and there are new carpets roads are coming. I am sure because there are not much of traffic in those areas, that's maybe good enough rather than an expressway. Maybe in the latter time that expressways may be needed, but as it is quite good enough.
There are ongoing calls from the private sector for public-private partnerships. Mr. Kumarage, what are the pros and the cons of such ventures?
It's always good if the private sector and public sector can merge, because these two entities have different strengths, especially in the public sector. They have a lot of expertise, and maybe now, say for instance, they may hold land, but they may not be able to develop. But if there is a private sector, public and private sector combination, joint venture, which we see few projects have already come, they can be developed. The private sector can infuse money, give and work together, and the private sector can facilitate the regulatory requirement, because most of the regulatory requirements are lying with the public sector. They can give the necessary approvals, and the expedition and the efficiency of the private sector can be coupled with that strength, and give ultimately a very good product.
That was an exclusive interview with PLC's DP Kumarage. Up next is the Voice of Business, but first a few commercials.